Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. Now it's no surprise or secret that I use plugins in my game. I always talk about narrative and advanced locomotion system, a bunch of other plugins, and you absolutely should use a plugin. It's not a bad thing at all. However, sometimes when you use a plugin so much in your game and then they roll out a new update, it can completely brick your game. I've been working on a undisclosed client game, subscribe because that'll be announced soon, where we've recently upgraded from one plugin version to a major version, and it completely bricked the game, but we needed those updates. So in today's tutorial, what I'm going to do is share some experiences and some tips with you on how to update or upgrade a plugin when you can. So this is Decryption's guide with some amount of tips on how to upgrade a plugin in Unreal Engine 5. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to start with is semantic versioning. What is that? You may have heard it before, you may not have. You may have heard major, minor and patch versions. Basically, it's a standard that was created some eons ago. It defines how software should be updated. So you'll see it in Unreal Engine, will be a good example. I'm going to use Narrative Tales for this plugin example. But it's basically, for each update, if you follow this standard, it makes it a lot easier for developers to follow along. So a major version, the first number, so Unreal 5, Unreal 4, Narrative 3, it's completely incompatible with anything backwards. It's changed so many things, it's renamed files, it's replaced things outright. If you simply replace this plugin, it will brick your game. And that's what I did on the client work. We needed it. The minor version is, you could probably make it work. For the most chances, it should work. So you can replace it over and you'll have very limited changes to have to do. It should just be very compatible, but it's not always. It should be. The final one is the patch version. This is 100%, you replace this, it's fixing a very minor existing bug. So an example, Unreal 5, from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5, completely incompatible. You cannot take an Unreal 5 game, stick it in Unreal 4, it doesn't work. Most of the updates you do from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5 is game changing. You'll probably have to change a bunch of ways you do things, a lot of code will have to be recompiled. Unreal 5.1 or Narrative 3.1, it adds a few things. It adds functionality that you can absolutely use. It's optional. You don't have to use it. It probably fixes some bugs as well. But it means you can replace it without possibly breaking everything. The final one is the patch version. This is Unreal 5.1.2, Unreal 5.3.5, the last number, Unreal Narrative Tales 3.6.1. It's just fixing bugs. That's it. Some bug that you may have reported yourself, it's fixed. That's all it is. So with that out of the way, the first thing to do when you see an update is check, do you need this version? So if I just look at the changelog for Narrative Tales, you can see we've got the changelogs for 3.6 here and 3.5. So these are a minor version update, and you can see all the features that are there, all the bug fixes, and it just goes like that. Different standards go around, there's loads of different ways you can do it. But the first thing is, do you need it? That's the first thing you need to look at. It's always good to be on the latest version, sure. Do you need them? There's no point wasting the time to update it to a feature you don't need. So in this case, the update from 3.5 to 3.6 added a bunch of different features. Quite a few of them, like the bug fixes, I did actually want. So I am going to update that. So in this case, I probably would update that. But for your project, look at it. If you don't need any of these, or maybe you've even fixed the bugs yourself, see if you actually need it. That runs to my next tip. Can you do the updates yourself? If you download the latest version of the project, open it up inside Unreal, and find the plugins folder, you can probably compare the changes from the changelog and maybe integrate it yourself. If you've got a very basic knowledge of C++, which will be in a tip later, maybe you can look at the changes and manually integrate them yourself. I've done this for a few clients because they've got a heavily custom version of the plugin, They wanted the latest changes. They sent me their plugin. I added the changes and gave it back to them. It makes it so much easier. You may also hear of this called running a fork of your own plugin or a branch of your own plugin. And that's what Unreal developers do. Like, you'll see AAA studios use their custom version of Unreal. And that's what they've done. They've took the Unreal Engine, stripped out so much of the stuff they want, and then rolled with that. And when a new update comes along, they will merge their changes in themselves. So let's actually get into some real tips then. So you've looked at the latest update. It's some form of update. It's either a major, minor, or patch version. You know you want it, and we need to look at adding it in. So the first thing I'd do is always run your plugins locally. So by that, I mean, if you come into your project, you've got your content here, you've got your U project, create a plugins folder, stick most of your plugins in there. One, it's easier for backing up and source control because you can include the plugins in your source control, which is fantastic. There has been bugs in the past with Epic Games where they forcefully updated people's plugins, and that kind of rules out your entire game if they do that, because they're not going to make a backup of your game before they update it. So always run it locally, always take backups, and before you start updating, take a backup. Trust me, sometimes so easy to recover a version if you've got a backup. The next tip then, if you are using a plugin, it might be too late now, but you can start doing it going ahead. The first tip is to make children of the plugins if you need to adapt it. So if the plugin comes with a blueprint or a component and you want to modify it, make a child of it. So for example, if I take narrative dialogue, for instance, in my dialogue here, I want to add some variables to all my dialogue. I could go and modify the C++, but then if the plugin updates, I'll have to redo that, which is something we want to try and avoid. So what I've done instead is I've made a dialogue blueprint and just called it master dialogue, and I've opened it up. And then I've added my changes in here. So I've said on begin dialogue, deactivate my interaction, loop over all the speakers, deactivate the AI, and do some other stuff. I've also added some variables for some custom logic I've got, and made an interface to do a custom random value. All stuff that I could code in the C++, absolutely. But if I've done it as a child and it's stored in my project, I can update this plugin, and I know that for the most part on a minor and a patch version, that my changes should retain and for the most part should work. In some cases, I've made changes, updated the plugin, and gone, oh, I don't need these changes anymore. They're already in the plugin now, which is great. So this tip is always try to make child copies of your changes. Other examples is sometimes if you've got a component that you can add directly to, say, your player or your controller, like this narrative interaction, you can actually make a child of it and modify the default values. So if I just come and create a new blueprint class, and most components you can do this with, if I just search for the interaction component, we've got narrative interaction component there. I'll just call it BP test interaction for now. Now I can come in and I can make code changes. I can do all of this. It's local to my project. And then when I update the plugin, it won't matter. I've not changed the plugin directly. So always make child blueprints or classes of your components in your project for any changes you want to do. For the most part, you can override it. So if I come in and say, get interaction start transform here, whether in C++ using supers or any other method or blueprints using parents, you can override the functions and just call the parent if you want to call the same logic. So in this case, if I were to just do that, just like normal, it would basically just say run the parent. But if I wanted to do some custom logic and say, I don't know, get player, say if I wanted it to run from the player pawn instead, I've made a child blueprint of that component and changed the core logic of it. This does help if the plugin exposes things like this. I have seen plugins in the past where they're so ridiculously hard-coded that you don't have a choice, but we'll come to that later. So this tip, always make child blueprints before modifying core blueprints. It helps out. So when you get things like pure character blueprints, make a child of it, modify that. When you update, all your changes are saved. The next tip is sometimes you can't do that. Say if you've got a UI, so I'll go to my Tails version, my Narrative Tails plugin, we've got some UI here. On my Narrative 3 overlay here, I want to modify the position of this and do anything I want. Sometimes you can't really make a child of it. Like on a UI widget, making a child doesn't really give you the control you need. So what I would do in that case is just copy this widget locally and make your changes directly to the copied version. Now this isn't always the best way, depending on how the plugin's built. If a plugin's built using interfaces, it makes life a lot easier. But for example, if I was to copy this plugin, I'd have to make sure that these existing ones, any casts are to my new. It is possible, I've done it in the past. It takes a little bit more setup work up front, but it does give you the flexibility that I can change this UI and then know fully that everything syncs up. So now I can come into my local version of the UI. I can grab this and say I'm putting my tasks box over here for some reason. And now I will use this local UI, and then when I update the plugin, that'll reset the built-in one, but my custom one will remain. This goes for other things, like if you download theme packs from like Common UI. So I've got Narrative Common UI here. If you go into, say, the styles, if you copy these locally and then use them, it makes it a lot easier instead of having to remember all your settings. So this next tip, some plugins will come with interfaces that you can implement to make your game work. So for example, if you take the Ninja Factions plugin, it uses an interface that you add to it in order to give you the code you need. This is fantastic. It means you don't have to use their existing blueprint. So for example, this might come with the BP third-person character, but instead you can create your own local one, add the interface to make it all work. Fantastic way of designing it. It does put some people off, so if you're not a coder, the word interface scares you, that's fine, we've covered it before, but this makes it super easy to update your plugins going forwards. So if a plugin gives you the option to use their existing one, or build it using their interfaces, absolutely go with their interfaces if you can. It means when you update the plugin, your code stays the same, which is perfect. Here's the next tip. You've done everything you can to follow all the tips to make it so you don't have to modify the plugin as best you can, but you still need to update it, and they've made some blueprint changes that you just need to figure out what it is. A few weeks ago, I was working on the narrative inventory, working with the devs to roll out some big updates to it. We had a lot of blueprint changes. So how do you relay all these blueprint changes? Well, Unreal actually has something built in, but only if you've got revision control turned on. If you don't, you can't use it, which is a bit annoying. I wish you could compare two projects, it would be fantastic. Now, I would normally have an example prepped for this, but I've kind of killed my Perforce server, so I can't show you. So we're going to use a website to do it instead. But basically, Unreal's got a tool built in where you can compare two blueprints. Now, if somebody's just moving comments up and down, or they are adding a comment, moving a node up and down, it makes it really difficult, I'm not going to lie. But it can work really well. So basically, it's split into 3 segments. The first one is a list of all the changes it's found. If there's nothing in here, it's not been changed. It's broken down into several segments, so the blueprint itself, the defaults, the class settings, the components, construction script, blah, blah, blah. Loads of different things. If it's not there, I don't think it's got changes, so you're okay to ignore it. So, for example, if the plugin changed the default value of the character's move speed, you would see that under the defaults or the class settings, wherever it's specified. To the left and the right, it will show you your copy, and then it will show you the plugin's version and what's changed. It does normally highlight it in a pretty decent manner, as you can see. So as you click down the changes, you can see everything, what's changed between them. This is something I personally really want to get a hang of, and then I can start almost using this to update as well. If you've got the 2 plugins and you've got it built into version control, when you replace the plugin, this is a fantastic way for you to see the difference between 2 of them. Well, they're comparing a function, so you can see the difference between it. The only caveat with this one is it's last time I used it, it was very flaky. It crashed Unreal a lot. But you also need a proper version control setup with your plugins built into the version control. So it does kind of limit it, but the documentation from Unreal is, in the latest version, is saying it looks so much better. So this is something you should absolutely, if you have version control set up and not just a copy-paste backup, this is something great to look at. However, what if the plugin you're using has C++ changes in it? That's where it becomes a little bit more tough. And for the most part, even if you're not a coder, I would give it a little look, because some tools make it really, really easy to look at. So the tool I use is called Meld. I've talked about it on the channel before. It's basically a comparison tool. It compares two files. I use it for everything. I don't just use it for code. Sometimes if I'm copying a download link and I want to see if it's the same, I'll use it for that. Or if I'm checking some JSON object or some story and I want to see what's changed, I'll put it in. It can do anything. It's really good. It's completely free as well on all operating systems, but it's super easy to use. So if I just load up a project, so for example, I've got the Narrative Pro 1.0 here. I'm going to go into the source folder. Make sure you don't compare the binaries and everything, because you'll have a ridiculously hard time wading through it. So always go into the source and just click select. And then I'm going to come into my next one, so my updated version, and I'm just going to click it. And then all we do is hit compare, and it'll scan every single code file, compare it. I've got mine set up so it doesn't show if two files are the same. But you can see we have a lot of changes between version 1 and 2. So all you can do is if you see blue, it means both files exist and it's got changes. If you see it crossed out, it means it's been deleted or doesn't exist in one. And if you will see gold in the opposite one. So here we can see all these code files exist and they've got changes to compare. This one is crossed out, which means in version 1 it didn't exist, and in version 2 it's new. And then equally in this one, with this one being gold, it exists in this version, but is being deleted in the new version. So it's super simple. If you find something you want to look at, so let's pick a file I'm semi-confident with, the dialog.cpp for narrative tales, I will just double click on either one of them, and it will open up the code and show you all the changes. It's super easy. So all you do is you look down it, and you see the blocks. You've got your scroll bar here. If it's blue, it means it's a conflicting change. So you can see here, the old one was narrative NPC subsystem. The new one is narrative character subsystem. And then you've got two arrows. Do you want to keep it? If you do, just press the arrow to move it across. Meld will take care of the rest. That's all you do. You can press Ctrl-Z. You can even type it out yourself if you really want to. Sometimes when you scroll down, you'll see a chunk of green at some place. That means it doesn't exist in the other one. So you can see here, Narrative Pro has added this new thing for free movement and stop movement as an override. If you want to add that to your old one, you can just click the arrow to plug it in just like that and it'll disappear. Otherwise, you might not want it, so you can either delete it or just ignore it. Sometimes you'll come down and you'll see it'll get very complex like this. Just take it a piece at a time. I do know it gets a bit complicated. So up here, I'll start with this one. I can add that one in. I can say I want to keep this and change. And then you can just work your way down it like that in order to clear up the file essentially. And this will take the updates from the new version and put it in to your old one. It's also a great way to find changes and learn about how the plugins are created. Now, this isn't always a perfect way. So, for example, I've gone from Narrative Pro 1 to Narrative Pro 2. Thousands of changes. As you can see, if I go back to the list, thousands and thousands of changes. And a lot of them, it's saying code files have been completely wiped out. They haven't. They've just been reorganized to be in a better way, which is a perfectly great way, which is why it's gone from Narrative Pro 1, which is a major version, to Narrative Pro 2, which is a major version. I'm just using Narrative Pro in this example because that's what I was upgrading for the client. But you can see, it makes it really difficult to compare. So here's another tip. If you are comparing to C++ and you have made changes to the C++ yourself, compare your version to a clean version of your own. So what I mean by that is Compare Narrative Pro 1, my custom version, to Narrative Pro 1, a clean version. And then you can see all of your personal changes. So you can see here, I'm comparing my old version to a custom clean version. You'll see my personal, I've made a lot of changes to it to make it do what I want it to do. So you can see I've added some specific returns here on how the link speaker avatars work. I've made changes here to make it work, fix a bug, and that's fine. But because I'm comparing a clean version, the change list is a lot smaller. So you can see on narrative items, I've added a use montages array. In my custom version, it's not in the clean one. So what I can do is open up a notepad or keep this Meld open, and then I can see my changes, and then when I compare the old one to the new one, I can just add my specific changes. I hope that makes sense, definitely for more codey people. Still check it out if you're not a codey person. Sometimes you'll see changes that you can just update, and it'll be really easy. Like if I came into this file and saw this, I'm like, well, the new one adds use montages. My one doesn't have it. I'll add it in. There we go. The files are identical. And then I can save and move on. So this brings us to my final tip. There's a bunch of tips here to try and make it easier for you to use. But it's not always going to be seamless. Sometimes changes are made that are just going to break it. It doesn't matter if they're the best, most genius way in the world, they're using interfaces, it advises you to copy it locally. Sometimes that interface will change, be renamed, it's going to break something. So the biggest tip is learn the newest update before you have to use it. And what I mean by that, say you move from Unreal 4.9 to Unreal 5. Learn Unreal 5, not all of it, but the bits you need to use before you start moving to that engine. Same with plugins. If you're using Narrative Pro 1 and you're moving to Narrative Pro 2, load Pro 2 up, play with it. Don't update your project yet. Learn as much as you can. Learn all the new features. Learn all the new variables, everything you would need to use in that plugin. And this goes for anything Ninja, ALS, ACF, anything you want to use. Because then when you are updating it, you know what you're looking for. So for example, in my version of Narrative Tales here, I've got this play params variable here. And inside I've got two properties, start from ID and priority. Super simple. However, in the latest version of Narrative Tales, we're going to have a lot more exposed properties where you can specifically get override, whether it's free movement, stop movement, speakers, non-unique NPCs, blah, 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 blah. There's loads of different ways. This stumped me for longer than it really should have, and I wasn't happy about it. I was investigating a completely different area, but I was starting my dialogue, and free movement was just ticked like that in the new version. I didn't know this, and it's one of them really small features that's probably somewhere, but I've not seen it announced. And then I was stuck for so long because my dialogue kept acting as free movement, which basically means you can walk around and talk. It wasn't ticked for it, and I was scratching my head, what's going off? And it was this. It was treated as an override, and it was just ticking it. So this is what I'm saying. Learn the new updates as best you can. You're not going to learn absolutely everything most of the time. But if you can learn it, when you're translating your plugin across for the update, you will have a much better chance. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. There is some hopefully tips to make it easier for you to update plugins going forwards. It's never an easy job, I will say. Sometimes you've just got to make changes. Sometimes you will update, you will lose those changes, and you will have to remake them. It's far easier if you are making a change to the direct plugin if you note it down. Good documentation always prevails, it really does. So just going as an overview to all of these tips. First tip, do you actually need the update? Check the update out, see if you actually need it. Minor and patch versions are always easier to update than major versions. That's the point of them. So you can incrementally update them. But if you are going to a major version, just make sure you absolutely need the latest changes. Next, always run the plugins locally. It saves so much time and hassle if you've got it backed up and you've got it plugged into revision or source control. Try to make as many child components as you can. if the plugin allows it for what you're doing, make a child blueprint, make a child component, or even use interfaces, copy it locally, something like that. Try to make your changes outside of the plugin as best you can. It might even be the case that you make changes to your local one and you have to change one small tweak on the plugin itself. That one small tweak is far easier than the 500 clicks you did to reorganize the UI. Try to use Unreal's built-in diff tool if you've got revision or source control enabled. It will help you see the differences. If you haven't, you can open two Unreals up and compare the two. It's a bit more work to do, but that's another option. For the codey ones, or the ones who want to try and get into the C++ side, I do advise it. It's fantastic for expanding your knowledge, even if you don't want to code. Use a tool like Meld or JetBrains comparison, something that can compare things. Compare the two projects, see what changes are there. You might see that there's a big major update that the dev really probably shouldn't have done as a major update. So you can just copy a few lines of code and you're on the latest version. Next, learn the new version before you do anything. If you learn the new version, it saves countless headaches later because you know what you're looking for, you know what changes are there, you know when it's not working. One prime example, if you make the updates to your code, run your game and it doesn't work, you'll sit thinking, oh, I've not merged it properly. Whereas if you'd have learnt the new plugin, you may have found it was a bug. It's in the plugin and you're just replicating that bug and now scratching your head because you didn't find it. So learn the plugin before you do anything. And the final one, documentation is key. If you make a change, just document it somewhere. It doesn't matter where you do it. Stick a text file in your project. Create a fancy blueprint full of comments. It doesn't matter how you do it. Note the changes you've done, so when it does come to updating it, sometimes comparing it might not be worth it. You might have such a good list of your changes, you can just go, I'll put my changes in again. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this helped. Have you got any more tips on how you go about upgrading plugins? Do you just avoid it full stop until you absolutely need it? Let me know below. Thank you for watching. I hope this was a little bit different but helpful. It's a common question I do get. Let me know your tips. My name is Decryption and I will see you next time.